I'm delighted to welcome Stuart Murdock, who's the CEO of Shervine and who won the competition last year, to talk about their kind of continued growth journey and give some thoughts on how the companies that have pitched today might build on the success that they've already seen in the next year or so. So over to you, Stuart.
Fantastic, and thanks, Dan. I had that moment of fear actually when I was looking, and well, I guess I should probably say good luck to all of the companies who have pitched today. And there's something very ominous, isn't there, about Andy Williams' hands, the way he's kind of typing up to his camera there, and I remember feeling very disconcerted by that last year. So well done to all of you who perhaps didn't notice that in quite the way that I did last year. And it was a huge, I mean this quite sincerely, and I think those of you who are have pitched today will feel the same. It was a huge matter of pride to us at Shervine to win this, because this prize is a joint prize between to some extent the UK, or this is the way we chose to perceive it, between the UK tech industry and with the judges on the panel, government, and to that extent to be judged by, as the minister said earlier, techUK, or in a prize that's awarded by techUK, is to be judged by your peers and to be judged by what HMG sees as the industry. So that was a huge source of pride to the team. We felt very proud about it, and for the last year, hopefully it's been removed now. We've had a little logo at the bottom of our email signatures saying that we were winners, so hopefully whoever wins today will pick up on that. For those of you who weren't around last year to see what it was that we won for, it was a case of, as the judges said last year, right place, right time. We had and have a secure video, voice and chat solution, which actually came out of the back of an innovation project we did within the national security sector, in fact, for the Cabinet Office for the secret ROSA environment. So think of it as a secure Zoom or a secure Teams at the secret level. So the team over the last year have spent, as with all of these platforms, have spent their time matching capabilities and features, as we've seen that happening between Zoom and Teams and all of the other platforms that are out there. And they continue along that journey of integrating into other instant messaging ecosystems, for example. Over the last year, the market obviously massively accelerated in this area. Lots of people on this call, and I'm imagining everybody's been connected by Zoom. As Dan said, they've just gone off to a Teams meeting, and that feels a little bit like what most of us have probably spent the last year doing, flipping from one technology to another. And it's really been remarkable, and thanks to those companies for their innovations, and to the leadership of the organisations that have been able to push through the digital transformation that was necessary in order to help people to be able to work and shop and learn and everything from home. And I guess what we can anticipate happening now as we move back towards whatever the future presents for us, we can expect organisations to look at what they've done and the decisions that they've made around the choices of Zoom or Teams or all of the other decisions that they've rightly made in a hurry, and start to ask the questions around what they're going to do for the long term, for the future. So what I wanted to talk about, actually, rather than talk too much about my technology, and I'm sure you don't want this to be a vendor pitch, was really to talk about what's happened for us as a tech SME and how we've adapted to the last year, because I think that might spark some interesting thoughts, questions, etc. And I guess just to give a little bit of a preamble on that, for those of you who don't know too much about Shoreline. So we've actually been around since 2008, and we span out of work that was done for central government in national security. And so one of the things that, for those of the folk who are pitching today, one of the things I would encourage you to be brave about, and you obviously are by pitching today, is to believe that the things that you have designed, built and innovated around are things that ultimately you will ultimately be able to find a market for in the national security sector, and that there are hurdles, and there was a great panel that I kind of wish I'd been on earlier on, which was talking about some of the real hurdles that you'll face. But to take the long view on those markets where you've not already got any presence in those markets, have faith that if your solution is something that is going to be good for the security of the United Kingdom and our allies, that those hurdles will eventually be overcome. Perhaps don't bet your first year or two's revenue on securing contracts in the national security market. And in fact, one of the things we were one of, in fact, cohort 0 or cohort 1 at Lorca, the true and original guinea pigs, and I was minded by Sarge's comment earlier on around what it really takes to support SMEs, and I think I had something that was nearly counted as a post of mine going viral on LinkedIn, if LinkedIn posts can ever go viral, which was really quite early on in the first lockdown, where there was a question around how we might go about supporting SMEs in the UK, and I had a post where I was arguing that actually the best way that we could support SMEs, particularly in this sector, I understand that it's very different in different sectors, but within this sector, is actually for government to give contracts to SMEs, to break through the barriers and give us contracts. And that's the best possible support that we could have, get real users using our kit and technology. So I think that was my all-time highest ranking LinkedIn post. So thank you to all of those of you who commented on and reshared that. So what have we learned? When we span out of working in the national, working directly with for national security back in 2008, we decided in a slightly anarchic way then that we were going to work entirely in an entirely distributed way. So we were going to work from home or from office setups, and back in 2008 that just really wasn't done. Contractors were, and to some extent prior to lockdown or the pandemic, were expected to turn up to site and to be seen and to be DV cleared and so on and so forth. So at the time that was very far-sighted by the sponsors that we had within the agency that we were working for at the time. And so to some extent, when the pandemic hit, you might have thought we were ahead of the game. We'd started in 2008, we'd worked and evolved some really highly sophisticated ways of working, we like to think, to enable us to do that work in an entirely distributed way. Many of the engineers who work for us routinely only ever work remotely, work from an office setup that they've got at home. But of course, the thing that was different was they may very well have been used to working from home, but what they weren't used to was their partners also working from home, or their kids needing to be educated, and so on and so forth. And so whilst we may have been ahead of the game on having a setup that had a camera and having rooms and having the security all sorted out and making sure that everybody had a headset and muted and all of those kind of things that we've all had to learn over the last year, that didn't help when it was lesson time for the little one, and the little one needed somebody to look after them, or there was only one room in the house and two people needed to get a job done, and the bandwidth wasn't great for that, and somebody in another room was playing some form of Call of Duty or something like that, was eating all of the bandwidth, or streaming the latest Netflix series. So we too, like all of us, have had to adapt and learn about that over the last year. And frankly, we're still learning how to adapt to that and imagining what that might mean for the future. How can we adapt as a really very flexible organisation anyway to allow for those kind of things to become more normal? And one of the things that we've allowed for coming out of the previous lockdowns is to give people the option to work for less days. And we've been slightly startled, frankly, by the number of people who have chosen to switch to 4 days. And we've actually got at least one person who's working 3 days, but a not insignificant number of people have chosen to work for 4 days. And their reason for doing that is entirely about work-life balance. They want to, they've discovered that they can do more around the house with sport and all of those kind of things, and they want to carry on doing that. And so I'm imagining that that's going to be something that's replicated across certainly our industry. Now, that presents a bit of a problem for me, of course, because on the other hand, we, I think, like many others in the industry at the moment, are suffering really hard from the being able to recruit folk. So it was hard. Actually, I think we found it less hard than some other organisations prior to the pandemic, but subsequent to the pandemic, and certainly in the security and cybersecurity domain, we were just finding it really incredibly hard to hire people. So having less of the people that we've already got and finding it harder to recruit new people right now creates a bit of a conundrum. Who'd have my job, eh? What other things have we learnt? So I guess this is something that all of us will have felt, the 100% availability issue. So whilst people may report that they have been able to be quite efficient because they've been sat at the same flipping desk all day, every hour of every day, with no break in between meetings, because they don't have to walk from one meeting room to another. People's calendars have absolutely backed up with meetings, and we ourselves, despite having evolved a different way of working for ourselves, have found with customers and partners and suppliers, etc., all being more readily contactable, all of our calendars have got squished full of meetings too. So there's of course an argument where we may be very much more effective. We may do more meetings in a day. How much more efficient? How much more effective are we? I think it's certainly the case that just how effective we are have been deteriorated by just jumping from one meeting to another without having the ability to reset. And so we're encouraging, certainly within Shorevine and when speaking to suppliers, customers, etc., folk to explicitly block out time that just can't be taken and filled with meetings. Seems like a simple hack, but actually harder to do in practice than it is as a principle. And also many of the meeting and calendaring tools that you've got now will allow you to do quirky amounts of time for your meeting. So instead of a full hour or a full half hour, to shave off 5 minutes at the beginning or end of those meetings, and try and resist the temptation just to run it up to the next hour and actually take a break in between meetings. And there's loads of really fantastic research. I think I saw some coming out of Microsoft that talked just about how showing the real effect on the brain of just going from one meeting straight into another. We've talked a bit about the problem of having to switch tools. So I think I've been in 4 different video conferencing tools over the course of today. And of course, you're switching from one to the other. The headset doesn't reconnect, and all of those kind of issues. And so trying to have some form of standardization around certainly our organization and minimize the amount of that switching has become a really important thing for us. The other thing is something that we had and has been, I imagine, borderline miraculous. Most of those of you who haven't been in the position before of having to work remotely is how you were able to get kit and how you were put in a position by your own IT teams to be able to work remotely. And it might have seemed like ages for some of you, but in the grand scheme of things was probably no time at all as to what it would have taken if that hadn't have had to have been done in a hurry. But one of the things we've found more challenging this year is, what do you do about the backup plans? Everyone who works for Shoreline has both their main place of work, usually at home, and an office set up at home, but then they have to nominate a backup plan. It's their nearest co-working space, or their parents' house down the road, or mate's office or something like that, but they have to nominate one of those as a backup in case for some reason their home setup just doesn't work within a day. Now, of course, during lockdown, all of those backup plans kind of went out the window. So what did we do when there was no internet connectivity? But I have to say, it's been quite remarkable how the networking infrastructure has held up for most of the time for most people. And frankly, we just said to people, if you can't get on, it will be sorted by tomorrow. Just go away and do more homework with your kids. I guess just thinking out in terms of the what it is that might change now, have changed forever. So we talked a little bit about that flexibility that I think we've offered and people are starting to expect, or certainly cherish in a way that perhaps they hadn't had the opportunity to before. So maybe that will become a trend in its own right. Another thing that I think we might expect to change is, remember, and I am an example of one of these people who always turns up to work, never have a day off sick, turn up to the office, with really bad cold, really bad flu, or man flu at least. And I think the culture of that coming into the office when you're a bit under the weather will change. Now that people have got a setup at home and have proven in almost literally every case that they're able to work from home, actually I think organisations, for the health of the rest of the staff there, will start to change policy and say, if you think you've got a cold, if you've got the sniffles, we don't want you coming into the office, just stay at home. You can work easily from the office. Take a much more cautious approach to that, and I think that will have a positive effect. I mean, there were like 0 cases of flu, weren't there, over this last season in the UK. So I think that will have an overall beneficial effect on all of our well-being. And Dan, I guess the perfect timing. Oh, you and I were talking, weren't we, the other day, just about what hybrid meetings might mean for the future. A big challenge for all of us is going to be, as it looks like you might be in an office there today, yeah. Dan. I'm certainly not. I'm in the spare room. How are organisations going to adapt to meetings like the ones that we used to enjoy at techUK with the famous sandwiches for the networking chats afterwards, where some people are going to be in the room physically and some aren't? How do we run those meetings in a way that doesn't marginalise or make one of those two sets of people feel like somehow they're not in the room, they're not in the conversation? And there'll be, I think, we need to think harder about that than simply just thinking, well, let's go back to what we were doing before, because I think we will have seen, Dan, I'll be interested to hear from techUK's point of view, how the participation has worked over the last year. Are you hearing more voices from people, etc.? Yeah,
so absolutely. Thanks, Stuart. And got a couple of questions on that point, really. But yeah, I'm in room 1 at techUK, where we would be doing this event in normal times, I suppose, but I'm on my own currently. There's only 2 of us in the office today. And yeah, I mean, I think we see real value in the face-to-face meetings, but I don't think we'll ever go back to a non-virtual option, because a great thing about the disruption, I suppose, is that we've been able to reach more effectively different parts of the country and organisations across all the regions and nations of the UK. Question I had for you, actually, Stuart, and you've touched on the kind of how your team works in that kind of hybrid environment or working from home, but looking at how you do business in that space, I think in the early throes of the pandemic, on the export side of things, we heard that a lot of businesses who had current relationships with various people, they managed okay, but it were harder to find new business because people like to see the whites of people's eyes, shake hands in normal times and those kind of things. Is that something that you've seen, and how have you tried to deal with that?
Gosh, yes. Thank you for reminding me, rubbing salt in that wound. That's been, but everybody that I've spoken to has been in exactly the same position, and I don't really think we will be able to compensate for the last year of lost business development. What all of us, to a greater or lesser extent, have been able to do, and in some cases we've benefited from the fact that customers who are sometimes hidden away on insecure locations have been at home, and therefore we're able to get them on a normal phone or a commercial grade web video conference. I think we've been able to speak to our existing customers much more readily, and I think the business development with existing clients, customers, has worked well, and I think some people will have done very well indeed from that. But for us, it's been a complete car crash in terms of business development from the future. I mean, exactly the meetings at techUK over a sandwich, where you're alongside someone that you've never spoken to before, you have a chat, you make a connection, and it's not until a year later that thing bears any fruit at all. You don't know whether it's going to bear fruit. It's the accidental bumping into each other, and I think we've all spent the last year trying out different forms of online version of that, including a hilarious one at the first conference last year, which was actually like a video game where we were kind of whizzing around in a kind of flat video gaming environment trying to network, which was the most fun one I've seen. But still, we were kind of networking with people that we could already recognize and kind of bumping into each other and having a chat. So I think we've lost, frankly, I think we've lost that year, and I'm really interested to hear how other people have done well in this space, because most of the people that I'm talking to are saying we just need to get back to the face-to-face thing. We need the accidental bumping into things. I mean, even on a call like this, it's hard, isn't it, for those of you who aren't on this top panel to chat to each other or notice that you're here. So what tends to happen is, people will be sending back chat messages to each other in other technologies like WhatsApp or LinkedIn or something. Hey, seeing you at the techUK thing today, how's it going, and etc. So that's the kind of thing. But on some, and I don't know actually with Zoom's webinar, I don't know whether the participants can see who's on this call. Sometimes with WebEx you can't, can you? You're in a webinar, you don't know who's there. There's no opportunity to network. So I think there's I don't think that's been readily solved for us or by us. Can't wait to get back for the techUK sandwiches.
No. Didn't do with M&S today. But no, I think what you've just said there, I think, we understand that there's a real value for techUK members in the kind of face-to-face physical meetings. And I agree. I don't really think, I always get the sense that we're making the best of a bad situation on video conferencing, just in terms of it's never quite the same. I know there's various platforms that do try and do the networking, like Hop-in and other things, but it's not hugely worked for us, I don't think, in terms of recreating the same kind of atmosphere. I can see that the judges are trickling back in, so I assume that's good news. But a final question, Stuart, for you. Obviously, we heard from Lorca earlier, and there'll be a lot of the pitching companies today that are working in co-working spaces or might consider it. I understand that's something that you've always done at Shervine. Can you just outline the real value that you see in that?
Yeah, I'll try and do it briefly, because I've seen the hands of Andy Williams are kind of around the front of the keyboard again and instilling fear in the pictures. Yeah, so co-working spaces, again, it was just kind of pushing that way of an unexpected way of working. You'd have thought, and I think I heard one of the organisations talking about being ListX, you'd have thought it would be impossible, certainly in 2008, for a contractor who was doing development for the national security agencies to be working from home, and to take it to the next level and to be working from a co-working space, of which there was exactly one at that time in the King's Cross Islington area. Was, I mean, again, this was kind of all out anarchy, but we had some of the senior leadership of one of the agencies we'd work with come along and see us working there, and kind of mind blown moment of people sitting on the same desk as other people, that they don't know what they're doing, and having conversations and being overheard. This is we can't have this. But actually, if you go to Tommy's, or if you go to Lorca, or if you go to ... actually within the buildings themselves, Hub 8, of course, in Cheltenham, you'll see now that the benefits of working in that kind of style have now been kind of adopted within the mainstream. We keep that really quite deliberately for two reasons. First and foremost, because most of our people work in a distributed way, we need a space for them to be able to go to, so that they're not always literally at home and never leave their desk. So we need them to have a place that they can go and sit in. So some people will have a local co-working space that they can use, and it's not local to any other Shorevine people. And then around the country, we'll usually have 2 or 3 of our own spaces where people can come to and expect to bump into other Shorevine folk. And of course, there are some people whose home working arrangements mean that it's really, really hard for them to work from home. And therefore, they need a space that they can more routinely turn up to. And so we've maintained them both for that reason. There's absolutely no concern around worrying that somebody else might nick your idea. Everyone who has pitched today thinks their idea is going to be the next Facebook. So they're not thinking about the idea of the person they're sat alongside, because their idea is the best idea ever. And everyone's thinking the same. So they're far too busy doing their own thing to steal somebody else's IP. Steal somebody else's staff, maybe, but not the IP.
Thanks, Stuart.